1994, you were contacted by some management folks from the Rolling Stones about putting a horn section together to go up and audition for what would become their Voodoo Lounge World Tour. Your solo career was just getting started then, and I remember it like it was yesterday. It was amazing. And you passed on the audition, but recommended Kent and Andy and myself to go up and audition for them. And that turned into a 15-year, 5 world tour gig, which we will always be extremely grateful to you for. But more importantly, when you look back at that, you passed on a coveted gig by any estimation, and you wanted to, from what I remember, wanted to give 100% of your energy into your solo career. And I think it really speaks a lot about you as an artist and as a person that you were dedicated to what you wanted to accomplish, and it was as hard as it is to get to the level. I mean, there's only one Chris Botti. Without that sounding cliche, that's what it is. Can you talk about the thinking that you were going through at that time, kind of a pivotal point in your career, I would imagine?
Yeah, well, maybe more than anything, I kind of felt maybe I shouldn't be playing another long period of tour that would take. I just was signed to Verve Records like maybe 6 months before that phone call came in. So we were just about ready to start making this album, and I'd been working on the demo tapes along with Andy Snitzer, hardcore, to try to get a record deal. That whole process of getting a record deal takes 1-2 years, and the contract signed, and the lawyers go blah blah blah. So I had this opportunity. They had the record, and I was afraid that if I went off and did this tour, that I would lose out on the ability to make an album. And I've never thought of myself, as a rock trumpet player, and I kind of, the opportunity to make my kind of jazz or whatever it is, an album for Verve at that time, I thought, I want to take this dice. I want to roll this dice and see what I can go do. And as much as I thought, what am I doing? Good Lord. I thought that it was for the right thing to do. It felt like the right move. It did nothing. I never grappled with it outside of the fact that I just, for the first couple of years, or I thought maybe financially it was the wrong move for sure.
Well, maybe in the short run, but I think in the long run, in all ways, it ended up being the right move for sure. Yeah, for sure. Great stuff. In 1999, I think it was 1999, you began what seems like a career-changing, maybe even life-changing association with Sting.
Yeah.
And you've gone on to tour with him extensively, played on many of his projects. He's toured and played on and sang on your projects. Can you share with us, as much as you'd like, just a little bit about that fruitful relationship?
I mean, the one thing I'm most proud of in my life, even more than success, is my friendship with him. He and Trudy, and they become my family. I mean, he's arguably, one of my closest friends. But it started out as we met in London at a bar, where I was over in London working with John Barry at the time, and I had told Sting I was going to be there, and he said, "Oh, meet me at this bar, and we'll have a drink. I need to talk to you about something." I said, "Okay." I didn't know him that well at the time, and he sat me down, and he said, "Listen, you have like 3 or 4 records out already, and you're known amongst musicians." He goes, "But I think that you need to lay down your arms, and not do your solo career for a few years. Come out and tour with me. And I've had success doing this with Branford, and I think I can do it with you too. I will break the sound of your trumpet to the whole world." Many of those people that are my fans, this is him talking, many of the people that are my fans aren't necessarily jazz fans, but they'll become your fans. And if you're willing to take this risk, I'm telling you, I'm going to make it work for you. And
wow.
Again, it seemed like a very natural, I was just like, and the thing is that the most interesting thing about this whole intersection in my life is I was so elated to do that, and my connection with him seemed, even at that point, very, very strong. And the minute I told my record company, Verve Records, that I was going to go on the road and do this time with Sting, they dropped me. They dropped me from Verve because they thought that I was not committed to my career. And I was devastated, and so I'm in the middle of the Sting tour and having the time of my life, building this friendship with this guy, and the tour ends, and I quickly get signed to Columbia Records, who kind of saw the momentum that was going on, and then Sting gave me my first in a litany of just unbelievable opportunities, where he fired me from his band and hired me to be his opening act. Now, you don't make any money as an opening act, but what you do get is you get the opportunity to walk out in front of 10, 20,000 people a night, and he did it throughout the United States and throughout Europe. So we got, you know, incredible opportunities, and then from that, someone at the Beacon Theater saw our show and said, you know, my friend Oprah would love this music. You know, got the CD from Oprah, and we were in Germany on tour, and my manager at the time came to me and said, Oprah wants you on her show, like, in 3 days, like now. She loves you. And, you know, thank you, Sting. I had to go to Sting and say, I need to leave the tour. Can you get another opening act? He said, go, just take off, you know, and go do it, and came back. And, I mean, that's just 1 in 100, you know, like, I'm more well known for not only my records, but for my PBS specials that we've done here in the United States. But I don't have any of them without having Sting on board first. I mean, it's really, really easy to get certain people to say, I'll be there, when you say Sting and the Boston Symphony are going to be there, and Yo-Yo Ma, what do you think? You know, they're like, oh, okay, sounds great, I'll be there, you know. And so, but if you don't have that first anchor and that friendship and the belief that, you know, that an instrumentalist can, like, penetrate, then it does, nothing happens, you know. And then to find out that we have such respect for each other as friends, and that's everything to me. Like, that whole relationship has been, from a credibility standpoint, from a life standpoint, and from a family sort of standpoint, has been the defining stamp on my career for me as a person. Wow,
thanks for sharing all that. I mean, I knew some of that, but that was some really insightful stuff, and it's quite amazing. You know, you talked about Columbia Records. I think you have released 9 or 10, but it's a lot of records now on Columbia. Your latest is called Impressions, another fantastic recording. A couple of my favorites, Chris Botti in Boston. I mean, you just mentioned that. That is a spectacular recording. I love Italia, the one you did a few years back. Just great stuff. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with your producer, Bobby Colomby, who's been involved with you, I think, on all the Columbia projects?
I remember, Bobby Colomby is drummer originally, and formed a band called Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and then left Blood, Sweat, and Tears to go kind of become a record executive with a lot of clout. Had a lot to do with Harry Connick's career, and discovered Richard Marx and friendship with Richard. And then he and I, through Paul Simon and Paul Simon's former engineer, Roy Halley, got acquainted. And we became friends first. And I remember the day that I got dropped from Verve Records. I was here, we were playing on Long Island at Jones Beach at the time with Sting, and I called Bobby, who'd kind of become my distant godfather, you know, like, in the business he'd help me out and do stuff, but we didn't really have a working relationship at that time. He's just a guy I'd call up and talk, you know, bounce ideas off of. And I called him up, and I was almost speechless. I was so kind of, you know, I was 39 years old at the time. I'd had this great record deal on Verve, and it was gone, and I thought my career was over, and I was really bumming, you know. And I called him up, and I said, Bobby, they dropped me. And Bobby goes, where are you? And I said, oh, I'm driving. And he goes, do you have any luggage on you? You got a diary? I said, no, I don't have a diary. I don't care. And he goes, well, get a diary and circle today's date and write this as your best day in your life. And I said, what are you talking about? He goes, you're going to absolutely say Verve dropping you is the best day that you've ever had when you roll out 10 years from now. I'm like, no way. You know, like, this is terrible. And so he goes, mark my words. And he has this very positive sort of impact. So what happened is that Bobby turns around and gets me a deal on Columbia. And then as my career started to pick up on Columbia, I made a couple of records. And finally, Donnie Einer, who was the president of Columbia at the time, brings Bobby into his office and said, listen, this guy is selling a lot of records for a jazz musician, but we're basically going to, like, just condemn him to the jazz world, or you're going to step up to the plate and you're going to make a record that we can, like, really go for. And Bobby said, okay, well, what kind of record do you want? And Donnie Einer and Bobby and I sat down in a meeting, and basically they said, don't worry about radio, don't worry about anything, just make the record you want to make that you think would be a romantic, beautiful record, and don't play us any demos. Don't. You bring it back to us when it's done. We'll have a glass of wine. And we will go promote it, and we'll give you a shot. And they gave me a massive budget to go play with an orchestra. And basically, I was ripping off, Wynton's Hot House Flowers, a couple of Gil Evans records, John Coltrane, Johnny Hartman, intimate stuff, with orchestra and all that stuff. The template's all there, But how does a musician get $750,000 or $500,000 to make a record, Well, these two guys concocted it, and so voila, out comes When I Fall in Love, and it's a hit. And thanks to Oprah, it's really a hit, And so the thing starts really taking off. And Bobby Colomby is sitting at home, being my godfather. And I call him up every once in a while. Finally, when the gigs actually start paying, and we actually start really doing it, like selling concert tickets. Because you can be famous, you can have you can come off one of these shows, American Idol or something, and you'll be a household name. Doesn't mean you'll sell a concert ticket. Selling a concert ticket is a completely different animal. And you got to go out there and prove it, And so finally, after 4 years of selling concert tickets, I turned around and I said to Bobby, hold on a second, you're the guy that I go to every night. We talk 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 times a day, and yet you're the one that got me this deal. You're the one that's pulling all the strings, and you're not sharing in this financially. You're going to be my manager. And he goes, I hate managers. I don't want to be your manager. They're scumbags. I said, you're my manager. And so I forced him to be my manager. And all along, we've been producing records. He's been my producer. We've had that connection together. But finally, 7, 8 years ago, it became like a two-man team. So it's basically an office in LA, and he has an assistant, and we do the records together. He deals with the record company, and and we talk 12 times a day, and it's been a great, fantastic friendship.
Chris, thanks for sharing all that stuff. Amazing story there. I just wanted to add one thing, because you said the template's all there. There's nothing that you do that doesn't have the Chris Botti imprint on it. And I know a couple years ago, you called me about, originally there was going to be trombone on it, and then it ended up not having trombone, but a project you were doing with Joshua Bell. And I ended up just contracting a small orchestra, which you were kind enough to call me for that. And I was just there observing the whole session. And Gil Goldstein was a great arranger, arranged the music. And you changed some things, and you had all these great people, and Josh was there playing, sounding unbelievable. But you were a catalyst for it, and you changed a couple of things that Gil had written, and it made it significantly better. So I think a lot of times, you have a lot of humility in you, and you talk about the people that you look up to and appreciate. But your musicianship is on everybody the highest of levels, and you always make things better that you're involved in. I'm
very opinionated in the studio, and Bobby knows that more than anyone. When we make our records together, I have a very defined kind of way that I want to hear, especially where the horn sits, like the actual where it sits in an album. Because if you look at a stereo field, the one thing that kind of blows me away about when young kids make records now is they think if they go to a club and they're lighting it up at 2 in the morning and everyone's a little intoxicated and they're playing their 10th chorus of Night in Tunisia, they think that if they do that same thing on a microphone in a studio the next day, that it's going to translate and the people are going to be just as excited to hear it. It doesn't happen that way. And if you look at those great Miles Davis photos of the where he puts his bell against the microphone drop and what kind of microphone he uses and the kind of reverb you use, and then that in turn gives the trumpet the stature to sit in the mix the right way. You take that away, like if you take the actual sonics of an album away, especially for the kind of music we make, we're not the White Stripes. We're not out trying to make rock records. That you can be edgy and do that. But my goal is to make this instrument and my records beautiful, pretty. You want records that appeal in that way. So you got to keep chasing that. And you can't lose track. And if the tracks get too cluttered, for me, it knocks the person out of the box, and you can't get to them.
Well, that actually leads me into a question that I had for you. And, I've had some people who say, yeah, I've heard Chris live, it's so amazing, and I got his records, and it wasn't the same thing. And then I have other people who say, I love his records and his live. And I've heard you in both contexts. I'm a big fan, both sides of that. And maybe you could just talk even a little bit more about You know, when you hear your records, they're so well crafted, and then I go hear your band, which is the most kick-ass band that you're going to find anywhere, and you guys stretch like crazy. I mean, it's fantastic, and then the show is by any jazz standards, it's great. I mean, it's really exceptional. But maybe you could just share your thought process.
Very simple viewpoint. When you go see Joshua Bell or Long Long, great pianist, or Joshua Bell, great violinist, in concert, and they play all the stuff, and then the audience, when they get to, like, you know, Paganini unaccompanied, and Josh is going, and then they all stand up and go, oh, fantastic, bravo, bravo, right? Then that same couple will get in their car, they'll drive back to Westchester. Honey, what do you want to listen to? Let's put on some Chopin. Boom. They'll put on Chopin Prelude, Nocturnes, and go to sleep, right? The same goes for Miles Davis. Like, everyone that's a jazz fan, they love Plug Nickel, they love Sorcerer, they love all that stuff, right?
Right, of course.
But what does the general public know about Miles Davis? They know 2 albums, and they're not the jazziest of albums. Well, they're certainly not the most cutting edge. They're Kind of Blue and Sketches of Spain. And the one thread that those 2 threads that those albums have is the concept is restraint. I mean, Miles, you know, when they went out and did all the other records live in Europe, Tokyo, all that stuff with Sam Rivers, they played the same music off of Kind of Blue. They just played it like 50 BPMs quicker, and they were just flying all over the place. But that doesn't work for Kind of Blue. Kind of Blue is this moody, subtle, beautiful, hip, cool kind of experience. The same could be said for Sketches of Spain. You know, that there's not much jazz on Sketches of Spain. It's Miles interpreting the music from Rodrigo, right? But it's not like them blowing down a bunch of choruses, again, of all things you are, you know, or Green Dolphin Street. And so my job as to make a record is I don't want, you know, you don't want to necessarily feel all that chop-oriented stuff, right? You know, when John Coltrane and Johnny Hartman record is one of the most beautiful romantic records ever. Well, this is the same John Coltrane that played Giant Steps? Yes. And he's playing just wonderfully and with restraint. So you want to make records a certain way, but when you stand on that stage to have a concert, you better bring it. I mean, you better make it so those people go, I had no, you know, that's why they want to come back. And that's the only ticket I have. See, I don't have a hit. I've never had a hit. Right? Never had a hit song, never been on the radio, really, that had hit. So if you look at Bublé or these guys have had massive hits, or Sting or whomever, right? So my ticket into the world of music is surround myself with great musicians and go from city to city to city and literally try to win people over old school. So, you know, we went into San Francisco in 2001 and there was an audience of 4 people, and now we do 3 nights and there are 3,000 people there a night, you know? And so, but it's like, they leave the show going, well, we had no idea that you... A lot of people, like some of my friends, we played the Hollywood Bowl 2 years ago in L.A. One of my closest friends, who's never seen me before, he owns a restaurant out there in L.A., and goes, now, Chris, when I come see you at the Hollywood Bowl, is it just going to be you? Like I'm going to just walk out there and go... Good evening, friends. I mean, what? But they have no idea. Like, but for a rock show, if you're going to go see Coldplay, you know that, you know, Chris Martin or whatever is going to be standing there, and his band's going to be behind him. There's going to be a light show, and there's going to be loud music.
Right.
And hopefully you like the band. Right, or the Stones. You know, Mick's going to be running around. You know what's going to happen.
Right.
But for a trumpet show, you got a lot of people doing this, and so you need to like make sure that you put on a show that people pick up the phone the next day and call their friends and go, I went and saw that blonde guy play the trumpet and this show was incredible. That's what happens, you know. And so the word of mouth has something to do with it. It has everything. That's your act. That's different than making records. Making records, like, you know, I just want to be chilled. I don't want to be, you know, I don't want to hear all the crazy for me.
Wow, really insightful. I hope everybody takes those words to heed. That's right on the money.